Hello everyone, I'm DonTheCrown, and today I'm going to show you the most ridiculous build that I've seen in Diablo 4 so far. It is absolutely insane, and I really hope that they nerf or remove this build before launch, although it has been a lot of fun to play, so definitely try to check it out in the beta if you can. And pretty much I'm just going to show you a boss fight here. This is against Den Mother, which is considered one of the harder bosses in the game, and you're just incredibly tanky, and just really pay attention to the cooldowns here in the build. So as you can see, we're playing a little Piano Man. We also have a ton of shield right now. Enemies come in, but unfortunately they're all frozen before they can do anything. So I don't think we took an ounce of damage. Didn't even really have to try to do anything to the boss. And yeah. That's all thanks to our good friend here, Ice Blades. Ice Blades is kind of a not so great summoning skill. It has a 10-second cooldown that kind of just summons up these little frozen blades, which normally just summons just one, and they attack enemies kind of slowly, and it's not really all that good. Definitely not as good as Hydra, which is ridiculous. But Ice Blades has a thing here where its cooldown will be reduced by 1 second each time it hits a vulnerable enemy, and it has a chance to apply vulnerable itself, and then we get 50% of that Ice Blade's cooldown is applied to our other skills. So because of this, we're basically just turning the entire thing into a cooldown engine. Every single skill on our bar has a cooldown, and then on top of that, once you reach level 15 I believe and do the quest, you can enchant a skill into like your character itself. And so Ice Blade's enchantment is for every 20 seconds in cooldowns you spend, you spawn an Ice Blades on a random enemy. So that's why, like, when I summon up Ice Blades, you can see here 17 stack there, and it doesn't appear to take in account for the actual cooldown reduction you have in your gear. So having cooldown reduction in your gear is actually really good here. But you can see here I summoned up 2 blades. And yeah, these things just go to town. And so the skills that we're using across the bar is Frost Nova. We have the setup to apply vulnerable as well. And this applies vulnerable for 8 seconds against the boss, which means the bosses are just going to be permanently always vulnerable, which is really good because it's going to reset our cooldowns. We have teleport to move us around a little bit. And then we have Flame Shield, which is pretty insane because this makes us immune to damage while it's active. Right now I have it on 2-second duration, and also gives us movement speed, so that is kind of nice to move around a little fast. But you're, being immune, you're immune to damage, you move to all negative effects, and if it comes off cooldown and you're like frozen or something, you can activate it and it pops you out of the crowd control. We're also using Lightning Spear. This is just another summon that zaps around and damaging enemies. This does a little bit of damage. Ideally, we would level this up a little bit more. We have Ice Blades, of course, and then we have Ice Armor. So Ice Armor helps us get even more barrier. And yeah, this build is nuts. One of the things I really like about it is that it doesn't require you to have any legendary powers. No legendary power like really makes this build super tick or super work really well. But there are definitely some legendary powers that benefit from this. So we have damaging an elite enemy gives you a barrier. This is just kind of nice to have in general. We're also using increased damage while you have a barrier active. Ideally, I would get this on a weapon because it doubles the effectiveness of this. Since we are getting barrier all the time, works really well. This, we actually have exactly the same thing on our necklace. This makes it so that when we're hit, when we're not healthy, so 79% or lower, we get a magical bubble around us that makes us immune to damage. So in case something happens to break through our cooldowns, we just become immune to damage for 7.5 seconds, which is very nice. And then last but not least, you deal increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have barrier. Basically every enemy is going to be vulnerable. We're always going to have barrier. So this is just a raw more damage modifier. I'm going to go over the tree real quick. I have Arc Lash put in here for if you're like trying to move fast and run through dungeons a little bit quicker. This does help out because you can build up some movement speed, but I generally don't use that all that much. In the second tier, none of this stuff has cooldowns or anything to do with cooldowns, so we don't want to deal with that. So instead we take Potent Warding. After casting a non-basic skill, you gain 6% resistance to all elements and additional 3% to that skill's element for 3 seconds, which means that we're basically going to have 6 to 9 resistance to everything all the time, and that's very good for being even more tanky. And then in this section, we're basically taking everything. So Flame Shield, of course, the next node gives us movement speed. We're taking Teleport. This reduces the cooldown for every enemy you hit with the teleport up to 3 seconds. You know, more cooldowns, the more better. Ice Armor is really, really great. Gives us barrier, and it also takes some of the damage we deal and adds it as more barrier. We're taking Glass Cannon. We want to do more damage. Doesn't matter that we're taking more damage because enemies are going to be frozen around us or, you know, hitting our barrier. Frost Nova is really, really good because it freezes everything around us, locking them down, and it also has like a kind of a reset thing. So killing enemies frozen by Frost Nova reduces its cooldown by 2 seconds, up to 6 seconds per cast. So that's pretty impactful when things start dying. And it also makes everything vulnerable, which empowers the Ice Blades to do their job. I have a couple points in here as well. I think I have something that is giving me levels to everything in the Conjuration Suite. So that's why we have like Hydra, for example, and 2 levels in Lightning Spear. I've also gotten 1 point over here. Using a cooldown grants you 10% of your maximum life as barrier for 5 seconds. So every time I'm smacking any button, I'm getting 10% of my maximum life and shield. That's absolutely disgusting. Eventually probably would max that out. Of course, we go down the bottom side here with Ice Blades. For Lightning Spear, I probably would go Invoked Lightning Spear for stunning enemies when critically striking, but for the most part, that's not super important. Now over here in Mastery, taking nothing. There's nothing to do with cooldowns here. There's barrier stuff, so maybe if we were having tankiness problems, we would consider doing that, but for the most part, most of this stuff here doesn't really do anything for us. And then last but not least, in ultimate skills, not taking anything here either. I tried messing around with Deep Freeze. It has like a minute-long cooldown, and the last node here makes it so that when you like end it, it reduces all your cooldowns by 50%. And honestly, this just seemed like to slow me down a little bit. You kind of get locked in an animation when you Deep Freeze, and reducing the cooldowns of all the other stuff doesn't really... It's not really all that impactful because then this cooldown takes a long time to reset. We really just want to keep rotating those cooldowns as much as possible so we can keep summoning out more Ice Blades. Down here, I'm not really sure what I would take for these particular things. Probably Shatter. After freeze expires, enemies explode for 25% of the damage you dealt to them while frozen. So that's just popping off more damage all the time. But we'd have to kind of see. I'm personally expecting this build to not make it to live, so I guess check in the description below to see if it still did. But definitely check this out in the beta. For just damaging skills and stuff, or stats on items, I'm looking for things that are vulnerable damage. Damage to close enemies is kind of okay. Damage in general, cold damage, cooldown reduction is pretty big. As I mentioned before, cooldown reduction does not seem to affect the like total score of a cooldown thing. So even if I press something that has like a 17-second cooldown here, yeah, it doesn't, like, it's not clear. Actually, no, I could be wrong here. I'm not really sure exactly how this is working right now, but it, you know, cooldown reduction, always good. You want to keep casting spells, you always want them up. The one small thing that I think is pretty important when you're clearing packs of this build is that when stuff is about to die, you do not want to Frost Nova, because you want to make sure that when you go into a new pack of mobs, you can Frost Nova right away. That's pretty much always going to summon up a blade for you, and then you want your Ice Blades to come up. I also put Ice Blades on left click because then I'm way more likely to like accidentally cast it, since I'm holding down left click to move anyways. You always want to be casting Ice Blades first if you can. The more Ice Blades you have out, the more cooldown machines you have running, and it's just really, really insane. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below and come by the stream. Thanks.